Hi guys, I'm Angelique van Zyl, and today we're going to look at market equilibrium and how prices are determined. In my previous videos, I've looked at demand and supply separately. Now we're going to put them together, and when they interact together, we call that market forces or the price mechanism. And that interaction causes a price. So when this price is created by the interaction between demand and supply, we call that the market price, and that also creates a market quantity or equilibrium quantity in return. So when the two, demand and supply, intersect on the graph, so where they connect, that we call the equilibrium point. We normally illustrate it as E, and that's the equilibrium point, and we will have a market price and we will have a market quantity. So this is when the consumers and the producers are happy at that particular price. Looking at this graph, again we have a demand curve and a supply curve. Where the two intersect, we call that the equilibrium point, as I showed you on the previous graph, and that's the only point where demand equals supply. So my demand equals the supply. So the quantity demanded is the same as the quantity supplied at that point. Any other point on the two individual curves are called disequilibrium points. Any point where demand doesn't equal supply, in other words, this is the only equilibrium point. This is the only point where the consumer and the producer are both happy at that particular price. Any other point on the two individual curves are called disequilibrium points. So I am just going to use these 2 points for now, but any point on either graph or on either curve is called a disequilibrium point. So I'm just going to put some fictitious amounts here because this is how I roll. I am going to put 10, 15, 5. Then I am just going to put an equilibrium or market quantity down. Let's make this 100. And let's put a value over here as 50. And a value over here as 150. Now, these 2 points, or the difference between these 2 points, illustrates excess supply. So we can go to the demand curve, and I actually can go to price 15, dollars, rands, any currency you want, and I can go down and I can see that the consumer is only willing to buy 50 units at that price. Then if I go to my supply curve at 15, I can see that they are willing to supply 150 units at that price. Remember, your suppliers want to supply at a higher price, your consumers want to have a bargain and want to pay less and get more. Then that is going to be my excess supply. So in other words, the difference between 50 and 150 would give me 100, and that would be the excess supply. And then when I am dealing with excess demand, I can again use the 2 points. Let's use the same values. It doesn't have to be the same values. I can use different values, but just for simplicity's sake, let's use the same values. So now it's the flip side. So my supplier is willing to supply 50 units at a price of 5. Remember, they want a higher price, and your consumers want 150 at a price of 5. Bargain. So again, I have an excess demand over here of 100. So now both sides, excess supply and excess demand, are not in equilibrium. It's in this equilibrium. So whether I have excess demand or excess supply, there's no market. There's no agreement between suppliers and consumers until I have reached equilibrium. So when I am looking at excess supply over here, what is going to happen is that one of the two parties or both need to make a compromise. So your price has to go down in order to reach the equilibrium. So the supplier has to give in here. He has to kind of compromise and say, okay, let's drop the price to 10 and then I'll be happy about the negotiation. Then if I'm looking at excess demand, the price has to increase. So here the consumer needs to give in the negotiations. The consumer has to be happy to pay a little bit more. So the price has to increase. So I have my excess demand and the price has to increase to reach the new equilibrium or the old equilibrium. Otherwise, there's no market. There is no deal. Now I'm going to throw shifts in the demand and supply curve into the mix. So firstly, I want to look at if my demand increases. So my demand curve is moving from D to D1, which is an increase in the demand and is an outward shift of the curve. This will mean my equilibrium point, which was E over here, has moved to this new one, E1, because this is the new intersection point. So when I'm looking at my old price and quantity over here, now with this new movement, it has moved to P1, and I can see from P to P1 there has been an increase, and my quantity has moved from Q to Q1, which is also an increase. So you always have to look at what was my old point, my old equilibrium point, what was my old market quantity, what was my old market price, and then see from there if your price has increased, if your quantity has increased, or what the result was of that shift. Now I want to look at a supply decrease or a supply fall. So S to S1 shows a decrease in my supply, and it is an inward shift of the curve. My original equilibrium point is over here, and my original market price is over there, my original quantity is over there. Now my new equilibrium point, which is formed between S1 and my normal D curve, is called my new equilibrium, E1, and this results in a new market price, which is at P1, and a new market quantity, which is at Q1. Now you can see from P to P1 there has been an increase in the price, and we can see from Q to Q1 there has been a decrease. Let's look at a decrease in demand. So if my demand falls. So this is a movement from D to D1, which is an inward shift of the curve. And if I have a look over here, this was my normal or my original equilibrium point. This was my price, and that was my market quantity. Now, with this inward shift of the curve, my new equilibrium point is made between D1 and my old S curve, and this results in a new price of P1 and a new quantity of Q1. And we can see going from P to P1 that there has been a decrease in the price and an increase in the quantity. Let's look at an increase in supply. So supply rises. So it goes from S to S1. My old equilibrium point, or my original equilibrium point, is over here. And my original price is over here. And my original quantity is over here. Now, with the new interception between D and S1, I have my new equilibrium point over here, E1, and this results in my new price, P1, and my new market quantity, Q1. I can see that the price has decreased from P to P1 and that my quantity has increased from Q to Q1. Thank you guys. I hope this video helped and that you understand how the interaction between demand and supply curves work and how prices are determined because of their interaction. If you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful, please like this video and go and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you guys soon. Bye.